The appealing thing about iris flowers is that everything comes in threes. You get 3 falls, 3 standards, and even 3 stamens on each flower. And then if you cut the seed capsules in half, you'll see that they're divided into 3, and those maturing seeds will also be triangular. Well, this triple arrangement is common to all iris flowers, but when you consider that there are literally thousands of different varieties and species in cultivation, then the number of different shapes and sizes and colours of flowers is really almost infinite. It's a versatile genus, and the chances are there's an iris to suit every habitat in your garden, from tiny rock garden plants to irises which enjoy life in a dry, sunny border and can blend in with your colour scheme there. And then in a more shady border where the soil's a bit richer and deeper, you can grow the Sibirica hybrids. And even in water, varieties like this make wonderful marginal plants for the water garden. But the sad thing about irises is that the blooms are so short-lived. At best, ones like this only last a day or two, and then they're gone. But having said that, if you plan your gardening carefully, you can have irises in bloom from the depths of winter with the reticulatas and the danfordiis, right through to the middle of summer. And even then, when the blooms are gone, irises often have superb foliage and can make a marvellous architectural statement in a border. But at this time of year, the flowering season comes to a climax with the tall, bearded irises. And in his Nottinghamshire garden, Bryan Dodsworth breeds them by the thousand. Well, Bryan, you've got a marvellous display here. How do you go about breeding these things?
You simply transfer the pollen from the iris you selected as a pollen parent to the stigma of the iris you selected as a pod parent, and in due course you'll get a pod if the cross takes. And you then harvest the seed, and we, in fact, refrigerate it throughout the winter because it helps the germination process. And if all goes well, we get germination inside the fridge in about 3 months' time. The ones we're looking at now are, in fact, in their 3rd year and final year. They were planted 3 years ago, and they'll be weeded out this year, and perhaps 5% will be retained for growing on, and the rest will be discarded.
What actually makes a good garden iris?
Well, we're looking at one now. This has been out for 4 days, and there's been some appalling weather here, and it's still retained its shape, and the reason for that is the substance in the petal. You feel how thick they are.
That's quite firm.
That's very firm. As a result of that, of course, it will hold, keep the shape.
What about the stems all down
Well,
here?
the other factor is that the stem is what we call branched, so that the flowers, in fact, are held well away from one another and well away from the stem, so that you can see each of them individually. Whereas if you look at this one, it lacks entirely the substance that we were looking at in the one before, the result of which is that the petals are floppy, and in any sort of wind or rain, the shape of the flower is completely destroyed. Again, if you look at this one, for example, you will see that the buds are very tight to the stem, so that when they wish to open, there won't in fact be room for them to do so, and they'll be compressed, and they'll never in fact attain their full form at all.
Well, there are lots of buds to come. This must be a very exciting time for you.
I think it is. It's the highlight of the season, really, for any breeder, because the irises normally do most of their opening in the very early hours of the morning. So you go to bed at night and you can see a bud that is obviously going to open the following day. And you can't wait to see it. You're up at 4:30 to see what's happening. Very exciting indeed.
There seem to be specific sort of patterns and types. Are they classified into groups?
They are, broadly speaking, yes. There are quite a number. Perhaps the principal among them is the self, which has got uniform colour. The sandals and the falls are the same colour. There are the pliccatas, where you get a stitching pattern around the fringe of all the petals. And there are the aminas, where you get the standards, which are white, and the falls of a variety of colours. They are the principal ones. There are a number of other minor categorizations as well, but those are the main ones.
As for colour, they seem to come in practically every colour of the rainbow.
That's right. We don't have Pillowbox red yet, but everything else.
Yes. And Iris, goddess of the rainbows, it's perhaps an apt name for such a lovely plant.
I don't think it could be better.
What about pests and diseases?
Well, fortunately, they're a very minor problem. The only pests we worry about are slugs, and they respond to the normal slug control. Diseases, perhaps the principal one, is bacterial soft rot, which tends to rot the rhizome if you get a particularly wet and clammy spring. The only remedy is to cut away the infected part with a knife, and the rhizome, in fact, will grow away happily after you've done that. The other two problems are scorch and virus. Neither of them are susceptible to any remedy, and the only solution is to live with it as long as you can, and when you find it too objectionable, you have to lift and burn.
What about propagating? How do you keep your irises going on?
Normally speaking, one would lift an iris clump every 3 or 4 years. If you don't, it becomes congested, the rhizomes tend to coil over each other, and in this case here, this plant has probably been in position for 5 or 6 years, and as you can see, there is very little flower.
Flowers all around the outside.
All around the outside and blank in the middle, so that is overdue for lifting. By far the best time to lift and replant bearded irises is some 6 weeks or so after they've finished flowering. Obviously, in this case, we're dealing with a standard dwarf iris, which flowers several weeks ahead of the standard tall beardeds.
Even so, it's still early enough, isn't it? It hasn't quite developed very long.
The roots should be at least twice the length that they are at the moment.
Because those are the old
These are the old
years.
roots rather than last year, but they serve as quite adequate anchorage.
Oh, right.
So we divide the outside pieces, take off the old expired fan, and you wouldn't plant a piece as large as that. I personally will split it up the middle like that and make 2 of it. And then you make your hole, leaving a mound in the middle with the tip of the mound on the same level as the surrounding surface. You trim the leaves. This serves 2 purposes. It reduces the moisture loss, and also, of course, it prevents windrock until the roots, in fact, get firmly established. So you deploy the roots around the hole concept. The surface of the rhizome should be exposed to the sun to ensure ripening to flower the following year. One has one's idea of what constitutes the perfect iris, and I think undoubtedly, bit by bit, one gets nearer to it.